The Metropolitan Gallery glowed with soft amber lights as Natalie Brooks adjusted her simple black dress for the third time that evening. She did not belong here among the crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. As a graduate student in fine arts, she had volunteered for this charity exhibition only because it looked good on her resume. Now, surrounded by people who probably spent more on their shoes than she paid for rent, she felt like an imposter in a world of polished perfection. She moved quietly between the displayed paintings, keeping herself busy by straightening the small information cards beside each artwork. The gallery buzzed with conversations about stock markets and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Natalie clutched her clipboard like a shield, trying to blend into the elegant wallpaper. Then her heart stopped. Across the gallery floor, weaving through the crowd with practiced charm, was Ryan Fletcher, her ex-boyfriend. The man who had spent 2 years telling her that her dreams of becoming an artist were childish, that she needed to be more practical, more realistic, more like him. The man who had left her for someone with a trust fund and connections. And there he was, arm-linked with his new girlfriend, a woman dripping in pearls and privilege. Ryan's eyes scanned the room and locked onto Natalie. His expression shifted into that familiar smirk, the one that said he had won and she had lost. He whispered something to his girlfriend, and they began moving in her direction. Panic flooded through Natalie like ice water. She could not face him, here. Not alone. Not looking like she was working as volunteer staff while he paraded his upgrade. The humiliation would be unbearable. Her breathing quickened as they drew closer. She needed an escape. She needed a miracle. Her desperate gaze swept across the gallery and landed on a man standing alone near a towering sculpture. He wore an impeccably tailored charcoal suit that fit him like it had been designed specifically for his tall, athletic frame. Dark hair, strong jawline, and an expression of complete detachment as he studied a modern art piece with what looked like genuine interest, rather than the pretentious appreciation she had seen on other faces tonight. He looked solid, safe, like an anchor in her hurricane of panic. Without thinking, without planning, without any rational thought whatsoever, Natalie walked straight toward him. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor with each determined step. He glanced up as she approached, his deep brown eyes registering surprise. Before he could speak, before she could lose her nerve, Natalie dropped her clipboard, grabbed the lapels of his expensive jacket, and kissed him. It was not graceful. It was not practiced. Her lips crashed against his in a moment of pure desperation. She tasted mint and coffee and felt the warmth of his surprised breath. Time seemed to freeze for 3 frantic heartbeats. Then she pulled back, her face burning with mortification at what she had just done. The stranger stared at her with wide eyes. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Natalie opened her mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg him not to call security. But before she could form a coherent sentence, something unexpected happened. His expression softened. The shock melted away and was replaced by understanding. He glanced over her shoulder, clearly seeing Ryan and his girlfriend frozen in stunned confusion across the gallery. Then he looked back at Natalie, and slowly, deliberately, he smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face from distant to disarmingly kind. He reached out and gently took her hand. His fingers were warm and steady against her trembling ones. Without a word, he turned them both away from her ex and guided her toward the gallery's small cafe area, a quiet corner away from the main exhibition space. "Are you all right?" he asked, once they were seated at a small marble table. His voice was deep and calm with an edge of concern that sounded completely genuine. Natalie buried her face in her hands. "I am so incredibly sorry. That was completely insane. I saw my ex and I just panicked and you were standing there and I am truly the worst person alive right now." He laughed softly, It was not mocking. It sounded almost relieved. I have attended exactly 17 of these charity events in the past 3 years. This is the first interesting thing that has happened at any of them. She looked up at him through her fingers. You are not going to call security? Why would I do that? He leaned back in his chair, that small smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. You looked like someone drowning, and I happened to be a convenient life raft. I am just glad I could help. His kindness only made her feel worse about the assault she had just committed. I promise I am not usually this crazy. I am actually a very boring person who follows rules and does not go around randomly kissing strangers at art galleries. What a coincidence, he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I am also usually very boring. I stand in corners at these events trying to figure out how quickly I can leave without being rude. I am Vincent, by the way. Natalie. She managed a weak smile. The crazy stranger kisser. Vincent ordered them both coffee from a passing waiter. As they waited, he nodded toward the clipboard she had abandoned on the floor earlier. So you are working the event? Or are you one of the artists? Graduate student in fine arts, Natalie explained, grateful for the shift to normal conversation. I volunteer at these things because it helps with networking, though after tonight I might be banned from every gallery in the city. I doubt that. Vincent accepted 2 cups of coffee from the returning waiter and pushed one toward her. Tell me about your art. What do you create? The question caught her off guard. Most people at these events asked what you did for money, not what you created for passion. Something about his genuine interest made her walls come down. She found herself talking about her watercolor paintings, about the tiny studio apartment, where she worked, about her dream of one day having her own exhibition. Vincent listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered. He asked thoughtful questions about technique and inspiration. He did not check his phone. He did not glance around the room. He was completely present in a way that felt rare and precious. What about you? Natalie asked finally, realizing she had been monopolizing the conversation. What brings you to these boring charity events? His expression flickered for just a moment. Something guarded passed through his eyes before the warmth returned. I support the arts. I believe in giving back, and occasionally I meet interesting people who make the evening worthwhile. The conversation flowed easily after that. They talked about favorite paintings, about the pretentious nature of modern art criticism, about the difference between creating for yourself versus creating for an audience. An hour passed without Natalie noticing. She had completely forgotten about Ryan, about her embarrassment, about everything except the man sitting across from her, who listened like her words held. Wait. When the event began winding down, Vincent walked her to the gallery exit. The night air was cool against her still flushed cheeks. Thank you, Natalie said softly, for not freaking out, for being kind, for everything. Vincent pulled a business card from his pocket and a pen. He crossed out whatever was printed on the card and wrote something on the back. There is a small coffee shop 2 blocks from here. Terrible coffee, but they have the most comfortable chairs in the city. Tomorrow, 2 in the afternoon, if you want. He pressed the card into her palm and walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the night like he had never been real at all. Natalie stood on the gallery steps, the card warm in her hand, her heart beating a strange, new rhythm. She had come to this event dreading every moment. She was leaving with hope fluttering in her chest like a caged bird finding an open window. Tomorrow felt like a promise. Natalie arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early the next afternoon. She had changed her outfit 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her feel like herself rather than someone trying too hard. The cafe was exactly as Vincent had described it. Small, tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local artwork. Vincent was already there. He sat in the corner by the window, wearing casual clothes that somehow looked just as elegant as his formal suit had. Dark jeans, a simple gray sweater, no tie, no armor. When he saw her, his face lit up with that same genuine smile from the night before. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "Did you think I would not?" Natalie slid into the chair across from him. "I hoped." He pushed a cup toward her. "I ordered you a cappuccino. I took a wild guess that you might prefer it to their regular coffee." The gesture touched her more than it should have. They fell into conversation as easily as they had the night before. Vincent asked about her paintings, her studies, her favorite artists. He listened with that same complete attention that made her feel like the only person in the world. Over the following weeks, they kept meeting. The coffee shop became their place. Vincent would show up in his casual clothes, leaving whatever other life he led at the door. Natalie began to realize that he fit into her world with surprising grace. He never complained about the cheap coffee or the worn furniture. He seemed genuinely fascinated by the simplicity of her life. She took him to her favorite art supply store, a cluttered shop where the owner knew every customer by name. Vincent wandered the narrow aisles with her, asking questions about different brush types and paper textures. He bought her a set of professional watercolor paints she had been admiring for months but could never afford. When she protested, he simply said it was an investment in art. He came to her tiny studio apartment one rainy afternoon. Natalie felt nervous, showing him the cramped space with its secondhand furniture and walls covered in her own paintings. But Vincent walked through slowly, studying each piece with genuine interest. He stopped in front of a watercolor of a storm over the ocean. "This one," he said quietly. "This is extraordinary." "It is just practice work," Natalie said, embarrassed. "By the praise?" "No." Vincent turned to look at her, his expression serious. "This captures something real, something most people spend their whole lives trying to express and never quite manage." The way he looked at her in that moment made her heart skip. It was not just attraction, though that was certainly there. It was recognition, like he saw, not just her art, but her soul, and found it worthy. They spent that afternoon on her worn couch, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing. Vincent told her about growing up feeling disconnected from the world around him, about the pressure of expectations he never asked for. He spoke carefully, choosing his words like he was walking through a minefield. Natalie sensed he was holding something back, but she did not push. Everyone had their secrets. She told him about her parents who had wanted her to become a lawyer, about her struggle to choose passion over practicality. Vincent reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "The world has enough lawyers," he said softly. "It needs more people brave enough to create beauty." The moment stretched between them, warm and intimate. Then Vincent glanced at his watch and his expression shifted. "I have a meeting I cannot miss. But tomorrow? Same coffee shop?" "Same coffee shop," Natalie agreed, ignoring the small ache of disappointment as he left. Their routine continued. Coffee dates turned into long walks through the city. Vincent showed her hidden gardens and quiet corners she had never discovered despite living there for 3 years. He knew the city in a way that suggested both intimacy and distance, like someone who lived there but was never quite part of it. One Saturday, Natalie convinced him to come to a local street fair with her. They wandered between vendor stalls, sampling homemade pastries and admiring handmade crafts. Vincent seemed lighter there, away from wherever he went when they were not together. He bought her a small painting from a street artist, a vibrant scene of the city skyline at sunset. "To inspire your next masterpiece," he said, grinning as he handed it to her. They were standing by a fountain, laughing about the overpriced lemonade they had just purchased when a familiar voice cut through Natalie's happiness like a knife. Well, this is pathetic. Ryan stood before them, arms crossed, that same smug expression plastered on his face. His girlfriend was nowhere in sight. Natalie Brooks playing house with some random guy. Do you really think this is going to last? People like you do not end up with happy endings. Natalie felt her chest tighten. All the old insecurities came flooding back. Ryan had a gift for finding her weakest points and pressing until she bled. "Walk away, Ryan," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Why? So you can keep pretending this means something?" Ryan laughed cruelly. "You are still the same broke art student with delusions of grandeur. Nothing has changed." Vincent had been quiet throughout the exchange. Now he stepped forward, not aggressively, but with a presence that seemed to fill the entire space. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply looked at Ryan with eyes that had gone cold and hard. "I am going to say this once," Vincent said, his tone carrying an authority that made even Natalie straighten. "You are going to leave. You are going to walk away and never speak to her again, because if you do not, you will discover that I have very little patience for people who hurt those I care about." There was something in his voice, in his bearing, that spoke of power Ryan had not anticipated. The smug expression faltered. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, seemed to think better of it, and took a step back. "Whatever," Ryan muttered, but his retreat was hasty and his bravado cracked. Natalie stared at Vincent. "Who are you?" Vincent's expression softened immediately. "Someone who cares about you." That night, they sat on a bench overlooking the river, as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples. The confrontation with Ryan had shaken something loose between them. The air felt charged with unspoken feelings. "Thank you," Natalie said quietly, "for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before." Vincent turned to face her. His hand came up to cup her cheek gently. "Natalie, I need you to understand something. Being with you, seeing the world through your eyes, it has changed everything for me. You make me want to be better, to be real." "You are real," she whispered. "I hope so." His voice carried a weight she did not fully understand. Then he kissed her. Not the desperate collision from their first meeting, but something tender and deep and real. His lips moved against hers with a reverence that made her feel precious. Her hands slid up to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like hope and possibility, and the terrifying joy of falling for someone completely. When they finally pulled apart, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I am falling in love with you," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "And that terrifies." "Me? Why?" Natalie asked, her heart soaring even as she sensed the shadow behind his words. Vincent pulled back slightly. Guilt flickered across his features. "Because I have not been entirely honest with you." Before she could ask what he meant, his phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it and his expression tightened. "I have to take this. I am sorry." He stepped away, speaking in low, clipped tones that sounded nothing like the man she had come to know. When he returned, the warmth had been replaced by tension. "There is an event tomorrow night," he said carefully. "A business gala. I know it is not your favorite thing, but would you come with me? Please?" Natalie saw the plea in his eyes. He needed her there. "Okay," she agreed, even as a small voice in her head whispered that everything was about to change. Vincent kissed her forehead. "Thank you. I will send a car for you tomorrow evening." As he walked away, Natalie sat alone by the river, watching the last light fade from the sky. She was in love with him, completely, terrifyingly in love. But she could not shake the feeling that she was in love with someone she did not fully. No, the secret between them was a living thing now, growing heavier with each passing day. Tomorrow, she would learn the truth. The sleek, black limousine that arrived at Natalie's apartment building the next evening should have been her first clue. She had expected a regular car service, but this vehicle looked like it belonged to royalty. The driver opened the door for her with practiced professionalism, and she slid into leather seats softer than anything she had ever touched. Vincent was already inside, looking breathtaking in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His hair was styled differently, slicked back in a way that made him look older, more sophisticated, more distant. When he smiled at her, she saw a flicker of the man she knew, but something else lurked beneath the surface now. Something that made her stomach tighten with unease. "You look beautiful," he said softly, taking her hand. Natalie had borrowed a dress from her roommate, a simple navy gown that felt inadequate the moment she stepped into that limousine. "Where exactly is this event?" "The Grand Horizon Hotel," Vincent said, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "I promise we will not stay long." The Grand Horizon was legendary. Natalie had walked past it countless times, but never dreamed of entering. Now she was being escorted through its massive golden doors into a ballroom that looked like something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers hung from cathedral ceilings. Women dripped in diamonds and designer gowns. Men in expensive tuxedos discussed mergers and acquisitions over champagne that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Natalie's hand tightened on Vincent's arm. "This is not just a business event. This is something else entirely." "Trust me," Vincent said, but there was tension in his voice that had not been there before. They moved through the crowd, and Natalie began to notice something strange. People were staring at them, not casual glances, but prolonged, interested stares. Women whispered behind their hands. Men nodded respectfully at Vincent with expressions that bordered on reverence. A waiter approached with champagne. "Mr. Ashford, welcome. Your usual table is ready." Mr. Ashford. The name hit Natalie like cold water. Vincent Ashford. Why did that sound familiar? Before she could process it, a distinguished older man in an immaculate suit approached them. "Vincent, wonderful to see you. We need to discuss the merger next week. Your strategy was brilliant, as always." Vincent shook his hand with easy confidence. "Of course, Jonathan. My assistant will set up a meeting." The man walked away, and Natalie stood, frozen. "Your assistant?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "Natalie, I can explain." But the pieces were falling into place now, clicking together with horrible clarity. She pulled out her phone and searched Vincent Ashford. The results flooded her screen. CEO of Ashford Enterprises, billionaire investor, one of the youngest self-made fortunes in the country. His photograph stared back at her from a dozen business magazines. Her hands began to shake. "You are Vincent Ashford, the Vincent Ashford." "Yes." His voice was quiet, almost defeated. "The billionaire CEO who owns half the buildings in this city." "Yes." "And you have been lying to me for weeks." Her voice cracked on the last word. Vincent reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I did not lie. I just did not tell you everything." "That is the same thing." Natalie's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby guests. She lowered it to a fierce whisper. "I told you everything about me, my struggles, my dreams, my fears. I let you into my tiny apartment and my messy life, and you were playing some kind of game the whole time." "It was not a game," Vincent said urgently. "Everything between us was real." "How can I believe that?" Tears burned in Natalie's eyes. "You watched me worry about paying rent. You listened to me talk about my dreams of one day being successful. And the whole time you were a billionaire pretending to be normal. Was it entertaining? Did you enjoy watching the poor art student play in her little world?" "No." Vincent's voice was raw. "Natalie, please. Being with you was the first time in years I felt like a real person instead of a title. I was not pretending. I was finally being myself." "Who even are you?" Natalie backed away from him. Because the man I fell in love with does not exist. He was just a character you played. The pain that crossed Vincent's face was so profound it almost made her stop. Almost. But the betrayal cut too deep. She had trusted him with everything while he had given her carefully edited pieces of himself. "I need to leave," she said, her voice breaking. "Natalie, wait." Vincent started after her, but she was already moving through the crowd, half running, toward the exit. People stared, but she did not care. She needed air, she needed space. She needed to breathe without feeling like her entire world had been built on lies. She burst through the hotel doors and kept walking. Her borrowed heels clicked against the pavement as tears streamed down her face. Behind her, she heard Vincent, calling her name, but she did not turn around. She could not. The following week was the longest of Natalie's life. She threw herself into her work, painting until her hands ached and her eyes burned. She painted storms and shipwrecks and broken things. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from Vincent, but she could not bring herself to answer. What could he possibly say that would make this hurt less? Her roommate found her on the 5th day, sitting on the floor of her studio, surrounded by finished paintings, tears streaming silently down her face. "You love him," her roommate said gently. "I love someone who does not exist," Natalie whispered. "Are you sure about that?" Natalie looked up at her friend. "He lied to me about who he was. Did he lie about how he felt? About the time you spent together? About the way he looked at you like you hung the moon?" The questions sat heavy in the room. Natalie did not have answers. On the 7th day, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, no one was there. But sitting on her doorstep was a package. Inside was a key with an address attached. Her hands trembled as she read the note in Vincent's handwriting. "I cannot undo my mistakes, but I can show you my truth. Please come. Please let me try to explain." The address led her to a building she had passed hundreds of times but never entered. It was an old warehouse in the arts district, the kind of place she had always dreamed of converting into a studio. She used the key and stepped inside. What she found took her breath away. The entire space had been transformed into an art gallery. But not just any gallery. Every single painting on the walls was hers. Pieces she had created over the years, some she had forgotten about, some she thought were lost. They were professionally framed and lit, displayed with the care and respect reserved for established masters. Vincent stood in the center of it all, looking smaller somehow despite the expensive suit. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. "I bought this building 3 weeks ago," he said quietly. "I was going to surprise you with it, a space for your work, your dreams. But I realize now that I did it all wrong. I kept trying to give you things without giving you the most important thing, the truth." Natalie walked slowly through the gallery, seeing her own work transformed by context and presentation. "Why did you hide who you were?" "Because everyone wants something from Vincent Ashford the billionaire," he said, his voice breaking. "Business deals, investments, connections, money. When you kissed me that first night, you had no idea who I was. You just saw someone who could help. And then when we talked, you saw me. Not my bank account, not my company, not what I could do for you. Just me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? So you lied to keep it." "I was selfish and wrong," Vincent admitted. "I told myself I was protecting what we had, but I was really just protecting myself from losing you. And I lost you anyway because I was too afraid to trust you with the truth." Natalie stopped in front of her storm painting, the one Vincent had admired in her apartment. "I fell in love with the man who sat in cheap coffee shops and walked through street fairs and listened to my dreams like they mattered. That was me," Vincent said urgently, stepping closer. "That is me. The title, the money, the company. Those are things I have. But the man who loves you, who thinks you are the most extraordinary person he has ever met, who sees the world differently because you showed him how. That is who I am. The real me." Natalie turned to face him. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. "You hurt me? I know. I am so sorry." Vincent's voice was wrecked. "I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me. No more secrets. No more hiding. Just honesty, even when it is hard. Especially when it is hard." "This gallery," Natalie gestured around them. "You did this for me? I did this because your work deserves to be seen, because you are talented and brilliant, and the world needs your art." Vincent took a shaky breath. "But I am not giving it to you as Vincent Ashford, the billionaire trying to impress you. I am giving it to you as the man who loves you, who believes in you, who wants to support your dreams without controlling them." Natalie looked into his eyes and saw everything she had seen that first night: vulnerability, honesty, hope. But now, she also saw the fear of losing her, the weight of his mistakes, the desperate sincerity of someone fighting for what mattered most. "No more lies," she said finally. "No more lies," Vincent promised. "Complete honesty, even the ugly parts. You are going to have to work very hard to earn back my trust. I will do whatever it takes." He reached out slowly, giving her the chance to pull away. When she did not, his hand cupped her cheek with infinite gentleness. "I love you, Natalie Brooks, the real you. And I want you to love the real me. All of it, the good, the complicated, and the mess." Natalie leaned into his touch, feeling the last of her walls crumble. "I already do, you impossible man." Vincent kissed her then, and it tasted like tears and truth and new beginnings. It was a promise made of honesty instead of pretense. When they finally pulled apart, Natalie rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we start over. Properly this time." Vincent smiled against her hair. "Hi, I am Vincent Ashford. I am a workaholic billionaire with control issues and a terrible habit of attending boring charity events. I also happen to be completely in love with a brilliant artist who makes me believe in magic." Natalie laughed through her tears. "Hi, I am Natalie Brooks. I am a broke graduate student with big dreams and a tendency to kiss strangers when I panic. I also happen to be in love with an impossible billionaire who surprised me by being real." They stood together in the gallery, surrounded by art and possibility, two imperfect people choosing honesty over comfort, love over fear. Outside, the city hummed with life. But inside that converted warehouse, in a space dedicated to dreams and truth, Natalie and Vincent built something more valuable than any fortune. They built a foundation of trust, and on that foundation, they would build a life.